The snowstorm outside made the world beyond the window a swirling void of white and gray. But inside the house, the warmth of the fireplace should have been enough to banish any unease. Yet the air seemed to carry a strange tension, a stillness that made my skin prickle. It was Christmas Eve, and the family was gathered in our old ancestral home, a place steeped in tradition and whispered legends. "Jonah!" my sister Sarah called, startling me out of my reverie. "Help me fetch some decorations from the attic, will you?" The attic was a place I had always avoided. As a child, I was sure its slanted shadows and forgotten relics hid something sinister. But tonight, her request carried the same casual tone as someone asking for another glass of wine. I couldn't refuse, though my heart clenched as we climbed the creaking stairs. The attic smelled of dust and decay, a forgotten graveyard of memories. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, cobwebs stretching between them like veils. We searched through the clutter, Sarah muttering about misplaced garlands, when my eyes fell on something peculiar, a small, ornate box tucked behind an old rocking horse. "What's this?" I asked, pulling it free and brushing off the dust. The box was heavy, its gilded edges tarnished with age. A faint sense of dread settled in my chest as I opened it. Inside was a candle, tall and ivory, its wax streaked with faint, swirling patterns of gold. There was something unnervingly pristine about it, as though the passing decades hadn't touched it at all. Sarah leaned over my shoulder. "Oh, that's the Christmas candle," she said, her voice tinged with surprise. "I thought it was lost ages ago." "Christmas candle? Great Aunt Margaret used to tell stories about it," Sarah explained, pulling it out of the box. "It's been in the family for generations. Some kind of heirloom." I remembered Margaret's stories, dark, winding tales I had dismissed as a child's nonsense. The candle, she'd said, was never to be lit, for it carried the spirit of a wronged ancestor, imprisoned in its flame. But the living room was alive with chatter and laughter when we returned, and the ominous weight of the attic began to fade. Without much thought, I placed the candle on the mantel above the fireplace. Its polished holder gleamed faintly in the flickering light, catching the eye of the room. "Shall we light it?" Sarah suggested suddenly. "No," I said quickly, but my protest sounded absurd even to me. It was just a candle, after all. Before I could stop her, Sarah struck a match and touched the flame to the wick. The candle flared to life with a hiss, its golden glow strangely bright, illuminating the room in a way that seemed almost too perfect. For a moment, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations faltered, replaced by an odd silence as if the house itself had taken a breath. Then the moment passed, and the night carried on. But the candle's glow never dimmed. The first sign that something was wrong came an hour later. I was standing near the fireplace, watching the snow pile up outside, when I caught a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye. Turning, I saw nothing, only the shadows cast by the fire, long and twisting. But the unease in my chest grew heavier. Sarah sat on the couch with her laptop, scrolling through some old records. "Jonah," she called, her voice tinged with unease. "Did you know this candle has a history?" "A history?" She gestured for me to join her. "It's in the family archives. Great-grandfather Albert inherited it from his father, who claimed it was a gift. But there's more. It's tied to some kind of scandal." My stomach tightened as I read over her shoulder. The records were vague, but the implication was clear. Our family had wronged someone, a distant relative named Lydia, disinherited and betrayed. The details were scarce, but the fallout was evident. A curse spoken in the dark and a family heirloom meant to contain the anger of the one who had been wronged. "That's ridiculous," I muttered, but my voice lacked conviction. Sarah frowned, her gaze drifting to the candle. Then why does it feel so strange? I wanted to brush it off as nonsense, but the air around us felt heavier now. The fire burned bright, yet the room seemed colder, the warmth failing to penetrate the growing chill in my bones. Then the whispers began. Faint at first, barely audible over the crackle of the fire. I thought it was my imagination until Sarah's head snapped up, her face pale. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded. The whispers came from nowhere and everywhere, soft and overlapping, words we couldn't quite make out, but which carried an undeniable malice. The candle's flame danced erratically, casting shadows that stretched and writhed on the walls. "We need to blow it out," I said, moving toward the candle. As I reached for it, the whispers grew louder, rising to a fever pitch. My hand froze inches from the flame, an invisible force holding me back. I stepped away, shaken. Sarah stood beside me, her face tight with fear. "It's not just a candle, Jonah. It's a prison, and we've let whatever's inside it out." Her words hung heavy in the air as the whispers subsided, leaving only an oppressive silence. The house, once warm and lively, felt foreign, hostile, a place where something ancient and angry had begun to stir. The air in the house had changed entirely. It wasn't just cold, it was sharp, biting, as though every breath cut into the lungs. Even the shadows seemed alive, stretching unnaturally across the walls as if watching us. The once festive laughter had turned to hushed murmurs, every creak of the old floorboards silencing conversations. By midnight, the whispers were back. They seeped into the quiet moments, faint and broken, like voices carried on the wind. I stood in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter as I strained to make out the words, but they were too fractured, too alien. Then I heard the laugh, a soft, brittle sound from the hallway, like dry leaves being crushed. My blood froze. Slowly, I turned toward the source. Nothing, just the hallway stretching into darkness. I stepped closer, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Sarah," I called softly, my voice trembling. No response. The house groaned, the old beams shifting under some unseen weight. And then, just beyond the doorway, I caught a flicker of movement, a shadow slipping across the wall, too fast and fluid to belong to anyone human. "Who's there?" I demanded, though my voice barely rose above a whisper. The shadow stopped, pooling into the corner like spilled ink. It stayed there, motionless, and I stood frozen, unable to breathe. Then it began to stretch, elongating unnaturally, the edges dissolving into the air like smoke. Footsteps behind me made me jump. I spun around to see Sarah, her face pale and drawn. "Did you see it?" I asked, my voice shaking. She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "It's not just in the shadows, Jonah. It's in the mirrors." My stomach turned. "What do you mean?" Sarah gestured toward the living room. "Come see." I followed her back to the fireplace where the cursed candle still burned with its unnervingly steady flame. She pointed to the antique mirror above the mantel. At first it looked normal, a slightly warped reflection of the room behind us. But then I saw it. A figure stood in the background just beyond the edge of the reflection. It wasn't human. Its limbs were elongated and wrong, its head tilted unnaturally to one side. Its face was a pale blur, featureless except for hollow, empty eyes that seemed to bore straight into me. As I stared, the figure moved. It turned its head slowly, as if acknowledging my gaze, then stepped forward in the reflection, even though no one moved in the room. I stumbled back, my breath hitching. Sarah grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "It's not just watching us," she whispered. "It's trying to come through." We ran from the room, the oppressive whispers rising in volume. I could feel it behind us, pressing in like a weight on my back. Upstairs, the air was colder still, and the walls seemed to hum with some unseen energy. "What do we do?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking. I shook my head, panic gripping me. The family history flashed in my mind. The curse, the warnings, the stories of vengeance passed down in hushed tones. "We need to find a way to stop it," I said, "before it's too late." By the time we found the family grimoire in the library, the whispers had become a constant presence, clawing at the edges of our sanity. Pages flipped beneath my trembling fingers as I searched for answers. Sarah hovered behind me, clutching her arms for warmth as the room seemed to grow darker. "Here," I said, my voice hoarse. The section on the candle was short, but it was enough. A ritual to end the curse. The steps were clear but horrifying. We needed a circle of salt, an incantation spoken in Latin, and blood, specifically from a willing family member. Sarah blanched. "Blood? Jonah, you're not seriously thinking. It's the only way!" I snapped, the desperation in my voice startling even me. "If we don't stop this, it'll kill us all. Or worse." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. "What do we need?" We worked quickly, gathering the items listed in the book. The salt was easy enough, but finding something to draw blood was harder. Eventually, Sarah handed me a kitchen knife, her hand trembling. As midnight approached, we gathered in the living room. The candle's flame had changed again, now a ghostly blue, casting eerie shadows that twisted and writhed across the walls. The oppressive air felt alive, charged with something malevolent. I poured the salt in a careful circle around the candle, murmuring the Latin incantation from the book. The words felt foreign and heavy on my tongue, as though speaking them summoned something I didn't fully understand. Then came the blood. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. I nodded, gripping the knife tightly. Without hesitation, I made a shallow cut across my palm, wincing as the blade bit into my skin. Blood welled up, dripping onto the candle. The reaction was immediate. The flame flared violently, casting the room in blinding light. The whispers rose into a deafening roar, overlapping screams and cries that seemed to come from every corner, and then it appeared. The spirit stepped out of the shadows, towering and terrible. Its form was vague but imposing, shifting like smoke yet undeniably solid. Its hollow eyes fixed on me, burning with rage and sorrow. "Why have you woken me?" it demanded, its voice echoing like thunder. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to speak. "We seek to end this curse, to free you." The spirit laughed, a cruel, guttural sound that made my blood run cold. "You think freedom comes so easily? Blood was spilled to bind me, and more will be spilled to release me. Are you ready to pay the price?" I faltered, the weight of its words sinking in. The candle's flame burned brighter still, and I realized too late that the ritual was more than a way to end the curse. It was a challenge, a test of our will to survive. The spirit loomed over us, its form writhing like smoke caught in an invisible wind. Its hollow eyes bore into mine, two gaping voids that seemed to devour light itself. The air around us was suffocating, thick with an unnatural chill that pressed against my skin like icy needles. "What price do you ask?" I managed, though my voice trembled with fear. The spirit's laughter rumbled through the room, low and cruel, reverberating in my chest. "You have lit my prison," it said, its voice echoing with overlapping tones. "And in doing so, You have reopened the wound of betrayal. Blood cannot extinguish my wrath. It only feeds it." Behind me, Sarah whimpered, her hands clenching tightly over the knife she held. "We didn't know," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, we didn't mean to release you." The spirit's head twisted unnaturally, its gaze snapping to her. "Ignorance is no excuse," it hissed, its voice rising like a gale. "Your family has thrived on stolen lives and broken promises. This house, this candle, they are monuments to your sins. Tonight, I reclaim what was taken." The candle's flame flared again, casting jagged shadows across the walls. The air pulsed with the spirit's fury, and the whispers returned louder than ever, their dissonant cries filling my ears. My vision blurred, my knees buckling as the house itself seemed to quake under the weight of its wrath. "We can end this!" I shouted, my voice barely audible over the cacophony. "Tell us how to make this right." The spirit paused, its twisted form solidifying for a moment. It extended one skeletal arm, its hand tapering into impossibly long fingers that pointed directly at me. "The sins of the father are paid by the son," it intoned. "Only the one who bears the family's blood can take my place within the flame. A life for a life. You're suffering for my release." The words struck me like a hammer. My breath hitched, and I felt Sarah's hand grip my arm. "No," she whispered, her voice desperate. "Jonah, you can't. There has to be another way." But deep down, I knew there wasn't. The curse was bound to our bloodline, and I was the one who had reignited it. The spirit's gaze didn't waver, its form radiating an ancient power that promised only destruction if denied. I turned to Sarah, my heart pounding. "If I don't do this, it'll destroy us," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "It'll destroy everyone we love. This is the only way." Tears streamed down her face, but she nodded, her grip loosening. The spirit moved closer, its towering shadow engulfing me. "Do you offer yourself freely?" it asked, its voice a low rumble. I swallowed hard, my pulse deafening in my ears. "Yes," I whispered. The spirit's laughter rose, filling the room with a chilling resonance. "Then step into the flame," it commanded. I approached the candle, its ghostly blue flame flickering wildly. The heat was oppressive, yet it seemed to draw me in, pulling at something deep within me. I glanced back at Sarah one last time, her tear-streaked face etched with sorrow. "Jonah, wait," she began, but it was too late. I reached into the flame. Pain erupted through my body, a searing agony that consumed every nerve. The whispers became deafening, a chaotic chorus of voices screaming in unison. My vision blurred, the room dissolving into a swirl of shadow and light. And then, stillness. When I opened my eyes, the spirit was gone. The whispers had fallen silent, and the house stood eerily calm. The candle's flame had vanished, leaving only a faint wisp of smoke curling into the air. Sarah rushed to my side, her hands trembling as she gripped my shoulders. "Jonah," she sobbed, "you're alive." But I didn't feel alive. My skin was cold, my body heavy, as though I had been hollowed out. I looked down at the extinguished candle, its wax melted into strange, jagged shapes. "We did it," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "The curse is over." But as she spoke, I felt it, deep in my chest, a faint flicker, like a match struck in the dark. A voice whispered in my mind, soft and insidious, "Not over. Never over." I turned to the mirror above the mantel, my reflection staring back at me with empty, hollow eyes.